Get some sleep, eh?
I'm almost done, just a sec.
It's really coming down hard.
Mom, phone. Mom.
It's right beside you.
Hello?
My name is Jeff.
So, Resident Evil Requiem is set to launch soon, as one of the big new horror games for 2026. Unless of course you include Code Violet, which, yeah, looks amazing.
It makes no damn sense. Compels me though.
And I have some, admittedly late, thoughts on this upcoming title. Now, while I am a fan of the Resident Evil series, I do think that there have been a lot more misses with this franchise than there have been successes. And it definitely has been suffering with an identity crisis for years. Even before Resident Evil 4, I'd argue, as you had weird action spin-offs like Dead Aim releasing next to the GameCube remake of the first game. Resident Evil has taken on so many different forms, from the classic fixed camera survival horror games, to the over-the-top action movies, the multiplayer games, to the recent modern era that's kind of homogenized elements of the classic games with RE4 style controls, or with incredibly varying degrees of success. I mean, just look at the situation with the remakes of 2 and 3. One universally acclaimed, and the other considered a massive disappointment.
Okay.
Which of course has led to a fan base that is incredibly divided, with some preferring the classic and more horror-focused games, and some preferring the more action-focused games, along with a whole host of new-gen fans that won't touch any game that came out before Resident Evil 7. And this is where Requiem starts to feel confusing to me, because with everything they've shown thus far, I'm struggling to work out who exactly this game is for, especially with the story setup that they're going with. Instead of following on from what the last game Village was setting up, with Chris declaring that he was about to go take on the BSAA for their involvement in the incident, and ultimately Ethan's death, and then that endgame teaser of Ethan's daughter Rose having a bigger role to play in the future of the series, Requiem seems to be ignoring all of that completely, which is an odd choice I think. Especially when the first reveal trailer had a character who looked extremely similar to Rose, almost like a red herring. But I guess this series is pretty notorious for just completely discarding new characters and story setups, so...
He's out of line, but he's right.
Requiem instead introduces a new character called Grace Ashcroft, the daughter of a character from those Outbreak spin-off games, who is now an FBI agent investigating a case linked to her mother's death. Capcom were initially very adamant that Grace was the sole protagonist of this game, with particular emphasis on how scared Grace is, and that this was so that they could really focus on making a horror-driven experience, since a character like Leon is more suited to an action game now. This did have me somewhat intrigued, as they're bringing back the stalker mechanic used in all the modern games except for the Resident Evil 4 remake, but I was still skeptical that they would be able to sustain that kind of tension and really commit to an experience akin to something like Alien Isolation, which I still think remains the best game built around a stalker mechanic. And then we finally got that new trailer revealing that Leon is in fact in this game, and this is honestly where my excitement for this game died almost completely. This reveal just annoyed me for a number of reasons. It felt like the most boring and safe thing that they could have done with this title, obviously because Leon is the poster boy of this franchise, when there's so many other characters I think are more deserving of a comeback than him. Like, surely Jill would have made more sense for a game that's supposedly going back to Raccoon City. His reveal, I feel, also completely undermined Grace. Like, I don't think anyone cares about her at all now, and everyone is just hyped that Leon is back.
You there, Leon?
Yeah,
You there, Leon?
Oh my god.
yeah.
Leon's back! Oh yeah.
Grace already seems to be kind of reduced to a damsel in distress with the need for Leon to come rescue her, even though I'm sure she'll probably be given some kind of overcoming her fears arc a la the Tomb Raider reboot. With what we've already seen so far, it seems to bear some unfortunate similarities too, with this whole trend of empowering female characters by brutalizing them, in ways that we'd simply laugh off when it comes to a character like Leon. Capcom have now stated that Requiem is actually half horror and half action, with Grace's sections being the horror and stealth focused ones, and then Leon's being the goofier, more action focused. This sounds like a good idea on paper, but you have to remember that this is Resident Evil we're talking about, a series that has been struggling for years with an identity crisis, seldom ever managing to find that balance between survival horror and action. I think that the only games that truly pulled it off are the original Resident Evil 4, Resident Evil 7, and the Resident Evil 2 remake. I hate to sound like such a cynic, but this whole idea of Requiem trying to mash together two very different tones and gameplay styles doesn't fill me with much confidence, given the series' history. It could turn out like Resident Evil Revelations, where half of that game was scary and atmospheric, and then half of it was not. Half of it was clever and fun to play, half of it was not. The half of the game where you played as Jill felt like a great fusion of classic Resident Evil puzzle solving with RE4 action controls, and it was great. And then the other half was all these disconnected feeling and really poorly designed action sequences as other characters. Although I'm actually worried that Requiem is going to have the opposite problem, where Grace's sections might end up being the parts of the game that are tedious, and Leon's end up being the parts of the game that are fun and well paced, especially on subsequent playthroughs. Because that's been an issue that all of these modern era games have had, is with the pacing. Specifically, and that there are always these forced walking simulator parts of the game that are fine on a first playthrough, but then really drag everything down when you play them again. Sherry's forced stealth sequence in Resident Evil 2 Remake is probably the lowest point of an otherwise great game. The whole Beneviento house and village is a great piece of condensed horror during that first playthrough, but it just feels tedious and almost out of place with the rest of the game when you have to play it again. It really drives the pacing to a halt, especially with how on rails it feels. Village and RE7 also have quite long intro sequences that can feel like a chore to sit through again as well, compared to other games that kinda just throw you into the horror and action straight away. I'm also worried that it's going to repeat the same problem that Revelations 2 had in blatantly recycling environments when switching characters. Most of Revelations 2 was exploring an area of Claire, then revisiting the area again in the next chapter as Barry, but with some slight tweaks to make it feel somewhat different, like you explore it backwards or some such. It already kind of looks like that's where Requiem is heading, with Leon seemingly heading into this large mansion to rescue Grace, after we've presumably already explored it thoroughly while playing as her. This is why I feel that this game is probably going to be a divisive amongst players if they really are committed to this approach of Grace being the slower, stealth, horror-focused character, and Leon being the over-the-top spectacle action stuff, which could go either way in terms of enjoyment. Since I think everyone collectively agrees that the Chris action sequence near the end of Village is one of the worst sequences probably in the franchise. It's just so mind-numbingly dumb and tensionless.
It's so dumb.
It's so dumb, it's brilliant.
No! It's just dumb!
It does look like Grace's sections might end up being the better of the two so far, since it seems they have made some improvements on the Stalker AI. It seems to be able to travel through the air ducts, much like the Alien in Alien Isolation, which is cool, and probably means it won't just be walking around after you like Lady D in Village, who I never found to be scary at all, because all she did was follow you. She wasn't clever at all. Although it will come down to the level design in the end as to how effective these Stalker sections are. If they're too linear and scripted feeling, then they will become tedious to replay through. It definitely needs to be a more open-ended map design like Alien Isolation, or the Mr. X approach from RE2 Remake, where they set him on you once the majority of the police station was opened up, and then he was testing your knowledge of the layout and ability to change your plans on the fly. Also, like I said, the story setup feels really confusing. Ignoring the conclusion of Village, reintroducing a nobody character from a spin-off game no new gen fans would have played, somehow linking it all back to Raccoon City, again. I mean, the lore of this franchise is already a nonsensical mess at this point. I'm just finding it hard to believe that this game isn't going to disappoint a lot of people, whether from a gameplay standpoint or a story one. Will it be as divisive as Resident Evil 6? Well, no. Probably not. I don't think any game will be. But considering how split opinions are with fans when it comes to horror and action, and the fact that Requiem is seemingly trying to appease both of them, I'm predicting that it might just end up pleasing no one.